Easy Explain, Kant's Groundwork, Second Section, Part 1. Going to be splitting up this section of Kant's Groundwork into two parts just because there's so much going on, there's so much to discuss. Just going to try to make it a little bit more digestible here. So the subtitle for this second section for Kant is Transition from Popular Moral Philosophy to the Metaphysics of Morals. And that's really his project here, right? He's creating this new Metaphysics of Morals. This is going to be his ethical theory. So by this point in the work, by the time we get to the second section, we're really going to start to get into his perspective, his theory here. So for starters, Kant says when moral worth is at issue, what counts is not the actions which one sees, but their inner principle, which one does not see. So this is the idea that the action itself is what has moral value and moral worth, right? What is actually happening behind the action itself, not so much the consequences. We got a little bit into that in the first section, starting to double down on it here to get into what that actually means, like what is the nature of the action itself. Let's move on here. Kant says the will is nothing other than practical reason, a capacity to choose only that which reason, independently of inclination, recognizes as practically necessary, i.e. as good. So for Kant here, he's saying your will, right, this force behind the action itself, this reason of ours that is being put into practice, if you're actually following this, if you're listening to it, if you're obeying this, it's going to be good, right? This is the right thing to do. This is the categorical imperative, as he calls it. And you may have heard of this. This is a big term for Kant, big concept. Essentially what we're doing here is we're taking the principle of the universal moral law we saw towards the end of the first section, and we are going to come back to that in the second section as well. Be saying this is the thing that you necessarily need to do, the good and the right thing to do. So let's look what Kant says about it. He says the categorical imperative, which declares the action to be of itself objectively necessary, without reference to any purpose, i.e., even apart from any other end, holds as an apodictically practical principle. So here it's essentially just the necessary, correct, right reason of action, the reason behind action, and it's one of those things you just can't argue, right? Apodictically, very strong word, and that was bolded by Kant. I took that from the text. I did not add that myself. To move on a little bit more on the categorical imperative, is limited by no condition, and as absolutely and yet practically necessary, can quite properly be called a command. Right, so getting back to this idea of law a little bit, right, of duty, we're seeing that he's saying it's command-based, it's command-driven. And a third one here on the categorical imperative, Kant says, it alone expresses a practical law. The unconditional command leads the will, no free discretion with regard to the opposite, and hence alone carries with it that necessity which we demand for a law. So starting to see here, categorical imperative, it's taking our reason, our will, putting it into practice. It's necessary, it's good. We're calling it a command, a duty, a law, right? Bring it back to the universal moral law now. We saw this a little bit at the end of the first section. Here it is again. So Kant says there's therefore only a single categorical imperative, and it is this. Act only according to that maxim through which you can at the same time will that it become a universal law. Right? Should sound familiar coming out of the first part. We're now putting two concepts together here after we're about halfway through the second section. And to wrap up this first part, just going to include here, Kant says, act as if the maxim of your action were to become by your will a universal law of nature, right? And this is the categorical imperative. This is about one half of the second section. We're going to continue into part 2 next to the second section, but for now, I hope this helps.